Now that we know that potential energy can be converted into kinetic energy, and we know that it is possible for a kinetic energy to be converted back into potential energy, we need to explore what's happening at the cellular level. So it's good to look at the molecules and explore potential and kinetic energy in terms of physics, such as jumping from a diving board. But now let's make this more practical and look at what's happening inside the cells. So there is a concept that's called cellular respiration, and it's very important that you do not confuse this with breathing, right? Cellular respiration is not the same thing as breathing. So that is very important for you to remember that. Cellular respiration is using fuel, so organic molecules, right? So fuel in our cells is known to be, the energy is known to be stored in organic molecules. And our cells are very good at breaking down these organic molecules in order to get the energy they need. And this energy will be used to perform work. So for example, if you're going to be a runner and you're going to compete in a 4x100 meter relay, you will need to run fast. This is a competition. You need to go as fast as you can. So you need to fuel for that, and usually fueling will be done, before the event in the form of nutrition. And you'll get those nutrients from high energy sources, probably carbohydrates. As those carbohydrates are used by your muscles, the muscles will break down these carbohydrates and transform these carbohydrates into usable energy. But usable energy, what I mean by that is that it will be energy that the cells will be able to use. I'm not talking here about a type of electricity. I'm not talking about light. I'm not talking about anything else but chemical energy. And once this energy is converted, we will be able to do some work. So the movement of this athlete along the track with a certain velocity, a certain speed, is work. So we know that our physiology allows us to convert chemical energy into work. So the chemical energy that is stored in our nutrition, our food. The interesting thing here is that most of the energy that we will extract from our food will be converted into heat. About 66% of all the energy released by the breakdown of fuel molecules, and in this case here we're talking about different things. We're talking about sugars, and of course we're talking about fats, because fats can be used as a source of energy. So about 66% of the energy that's released by the breakdown of these molecules will generate body heat. So it leaves us about 34% of the energy that is found in those chemical compounds, in these fuel molecules, will be used for the contraction of muscles. So when we think of food as fuel, we often think of calories, right? So we can look on any package and it tells us there are so many calories per portion. And some nutrients are energy rich and some others are energy poor. So some of them don't have a lot of energy in them, not a lot of calories, and some other food or nutrients have more. Some of them are denser than others. When we look at a calorie, most people do not understand or know what a calorie is. A calorie is actually the measure of heat, and it is the amount of energy that can raise the temperature of 1 gram of water. So basically 1 gram equals about 1 milliliter. So it's the raising of the temperature for 1 ml of water by 1 degrees Celsius. Calories are not very useful to understand how cells perform work. So for this reason, we won't talk about calories anymore. I just wanted to bring this because I think it's important to recognize that calories is a measure of the amount of energy that is found in nutrients, and that energy can be used by our cells. But the energy that is used by our cells is not calories. Calories is just a measurement of the amount of energy that there is. So chemical energy is released into our cells by the breakdown of organic molecules during cellular respiration. And cellular respiration is used to generate a very important molecule that is known as ATP. So ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. So what it means is that triphosphate is that there is a molecule of adenosine, and that adenosine is linked to 3 phosphate. 1, 2, and 3 right there. ATP is the common currency for all of the cells. ATP is released by the chemical breakdown of energy-rich molecules such as carbohydrates and fats. So as I mentioned earlier, ATP is known to be adenosine triphosphate. It is a organic molecule that is called adenosine, and we have it right here. And it is linked. So we have adenosine is this part here, is an adenine, and it is connected to a ribose sugar, and it has 3 phosphate linked to it. Once the ATP releases some energy, the energy is released by a breakdown of this 3rd phosphate here. So basically the link between the 2nd and the 3rd phosphate is one that contains a lot of energy. So breaking this link here generates a certain amount of energy, and that energy here can be used by our cells. So what it does is that when we have ATP with 3 phosphate and we break down the 3rd link right here, this link, when this phosphate is released, we end up with ADP. And ADP, because it now has 2 phosphate, and what we see here is adenosine diphosphate and not triphosphate, because we have 2 of them. So the energy that is released will be used for work. So whenever you're lifting something, if you are running, walking, cycling, or even breathing, well, this is all possible because ATP is constantly turned over into ADP by the cells that are working. This is true chemical work. So what do we see here? This molecule right here is the molecule of ATP. So we have our adenine right here. The sugar is right here. So we have our adenine here. We have ribose right here. And then we have our phosphates right here. And remember, we have 1, 2, and 3 phosphate groups. A phosphate group is this, with the phosphorus atom in the middle, and then we have 1, 2, 3, and 4 oxygen molecules that all carry a negative charge. When you link 3 phosphates, one after the other, every single one of those phosphates carries a negative charge. So let's add our adenosine right here, and we link this with our phosphates right there, right? So we have our 3 phosphates, 1, 2, and 3. What happens here, do you think, when you link 3 phosphates together in close quarters? They are linked via a covalent bond, but all of those phosphates have a negative charge. Well, a negative charge are going to repel each other. This molecule is highly unstable, basically because those phosphates are physically constrained by the chemical bonds, the covalent bonds. But when you think of 3 negative charges connected to one another, well, this can't be stable because all of those negative charges will repel each other. So for this reason, ATP will be converted into ADP plus a phosphate, and the energy that is contained between the 3 phosphates held together, when you lose one phosphate, well, the molecule is now more stable. And by becoming more stable, it releases energy. And that energy will be used for cellular work. And for example, if you think of how much ATP is needed for, contracting muscles, well, think about this. Is that a single working muscle cell, one cell, per second will be using up to 10 million ATP molecules. Just think how many muscle cells you have in your body. How many muscle cells do you need to cycle 10 kilometers, right? How many of ATP molecules do you need for that? You need a lot of that. So your cells are constantly working into converting organic molecules into ATP, and that is called cell respiration. And that cell respiration creates ATP molecules, and then this ATP will be converted into ADP plus phosphate that will be used for work and, for example, cycling. Okay? So, of course, you use a lot of ATP molecules. A lot of them are needed. So, basically, when you're exercising, you're constantly transforming chemical energy into another type of energy, maybe kinetic, because you're going at a certain speed on your bike, and that requires